Hey there, friends and running fans. This is Amby Burfoot welcoming you to the latest episode of the podcast, Running State of the Sport.
And this is George Hirsch, your co-host at Running State of the Sport. In every episode, we talk to the smartest, most informed, most influential, and sometimes fastest runners on the planet.
This week, we're lucky to have one of those fast runners, CJ Albertson, who's one of the perhaps favorites for the Olympic marathon trials coming up, quite noted for his intriguing strength and fortitude in the marathon. In fact, in December, CJ won the Cal International Marathon and a Baja Mexico Marathon on successive weekends, running almost exactly the same time, 2:11:09 in the first one, 2:11:08 in the second one. What an improvement, 1 second.
Pretty consistent. So, Amby, CJ first caught my attention, I think, when he did with a lot of the running world back in Boston in 2021. He took off from the start, and we've seen this over and over in Boston with that huge downhill start, as you know, and often there's a guy who just takes off and runs. You think he's just running for the camera and some TV time, and he's going to disappear quickly. And we thought this was the case since we didn't know a thing about CJ at the time. And as he kept running, his lead kept building, and by halfway, he had a pretty serious lead, and everyone is kind of Googling, and who is this guy? And he didn't win it, but he stayed right in the thick of the race, and he finished very strong, a 2:11 performance. Then he came back, ran the next couple of Bostons. Both of those were in the 2:10s. So this is a guy who can really, crank out some pretty darn fast marathons. But before we get to CJ, Amby, let us chat for a minute about some of the biggest running news that's been going on. What's caught your attention?
Yeah, there have been a couple of things. Thank you, George. For one, I'm intrigued by an idea that has been floated by Seb Coe, the head of World Athletics. And he's talking about a change in when the World Marathon Championships would take place. It's just a hypothetical change. But we all know the World Marathon, the World Track and Field meet takes place in the summer, probably in a hot climate somewhere. It's not a great place for marathoners. Seb is now saying, what would happen if we took this event, a true World Marathon Championship, and moved it to one of the World Marathon Majors dates? It could be in the spring in a London or Tokyo. It could be in the fall in a Berlin, Chicago, New York. Who knows? But at least it would move an important big marathon to a date when the weather would be a little bit better for those hoping to run it.
Yeah, good for Seb. Good for Seb for, kind of repurposing some of these events and looking hard at where we can get more out of them. I give him a lot of credit.
I absolutely agree. We need creative thinking. We've often kidded that the World Marathon Championships and the Olympic Marathon Championships should be held in, like the Winter Games rather than the Summer Games. And he's now floating out a good proposal for spring and fall, which are, of course, the best and now traditional marathon seasons. So I was also pleased that one of our old favorite all-time marathoners, Rosa Mota from Portugal, recently set 2 world records in her age group, which is now 65 to 69. She ran a race in Lisbon where she ran 39:40 for the 10K, which was a world record for her age group. And apparently she also set a world record halfway through the race when she clocked 19:58 at the halfway point. It's a little bit interesting to me also that a lot of the women who ran in the 84 Olympic Marathon, obviously Joan Benoit Samuelson, Rosa, and some others, are still going really strong. while I don't think we can say the same about the guys who ran in 84. They pretty much disappeared from the scene. So I don't know if there's any meaning there, but these women have got long legs, long-lasting legs, as well as fast legs, and it's impressive to still see them out there.
Yeah, it's great about Rosa, and you and I have known her for years and loved her, and we were in Seoul, of course, when she won the Olympic marathon back in 88, and she's just been a great champion, and every time we see her, it hasn't been often, it's a joy. So good for Rosa to keep doing it at age 65. What an inspiration she is. And on the absolute opposite end of the scale, there was a debut marathon in Dubai by an Ethiopian, Tigist Katima, whom, of course, we hadn't heard of. She'd never run a marathon and had really never run a race longer than 10K. And she ran the fastest debut marathon ever for a woman, 2:16:07, pretty darn swift. And she, like the other Ethiopian who set the world record in the marathon with the same first name, Tigist Sefa, really came from being an 800-meter runner. So we're seeing some really interesting leg speed move up. I mean, we're used to 10,000-meter people moving from the track to the roads and to the marathon. But, 800-meter runners who can, break 2 minutes and run even faster than that, jumping into the marathon and performing at extraordinary levels. I think it's going to be something to watch.
And some people, a few at least, are saying here's more evidence that the super shoes are doing something we've never seen before, because we never used to think of 800-meter runners as marathoners, but we certainly valued the speed they've got. Now people are saying, yeah, they've got the speed and the shoes are adding the endurance, and you put one and one together and you come up with three, some fast marathoners like we've never seen before.
Yeah, and, Boston's announcing their field for April, of course, a couple of months after the Olympic trials, and perennial favorite up in Boston, Des Linden, who won in an historic race in the most extraordinary weather conditions. Des is coming back to Boston for her 11th, and people are going to love to see her there. But she's doing the trials, and she's hanging in there as a Masters runner, age 40, and still performing again at a very high level.
And that's what George and I have been thinking about lately at our podcast, Running State of the Sport. This podcast, Running State of the Sport, is brought to you by MarathonHandbook.com and RunLongRunHealthy.com. Marathon Handbook is the world's leading marathon website with a special focus on trustworthy running information and free, runner-tested training plans for all ability levels.
Run Long, Run Healthy is Amby's weekly newsletter with the newest, most scientific, and most useful training advice for runners.
Next, let's turn to our guest this week, CJ Albertson. CJ's not one of the fastest guys in the marathon trials on February 3rd, but he might be the strongest. And he does already have an Olympic qualifying time, so he's poised for a really big effort on trials day. I'd also go so far as to say that CJ is one of the country's most popular marathon runners based on his really hard training and racing habits. CJ, welcome to the podcast, Running State of the Sport. We're happy to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk today.
So, CJ, why don't we start and we'll get our listeners up to speed. You can tell them a little bit, about you and your bio and just a quick summary and, just how old you are, where you're living, where'd you grow up, married, children, job, and, how do you spend your time when you're not logging all those miles, and just give us a little bit of that.
Yeah, so I'm 30 years old now. I'm married. I have 2 children. As of right now, a 2-year-old and she's almost 4 months. So yeah, 2 young ones. I'm living in Fresno, California, so right in the middle of California. I teach and coach at a community college, so Clovis Community College. And yeah, that's pretty much it between parenting, teaching, coaching, running a lot. Takes up most of my time. I don't really have any like super cool hobbies or anything else that I do. I like a lot of runners just kind of lay around on the couch whenever I have some downtime.
Well, CJ, there's not that much downtime with all the training you're doing and the 2 young kids and your wife. Tell us again quickly, what's a day look like? What time are you getting up and what's happening in the next 24 hours?
Yeah, I'll typically get up around like 6:20, 6:25. Our practice for our community college team starts at 7, and I live very close to work. Our school is only 2 miles away. The park that we practice at is sometimes is across the street from my house. And then our college doesn't have a track, but the track we use is relatively close. So I pretty much roll out of bed. All my stuff is pre-packed. All my clothes are laid out. I roll out of bed and hop in my car. So there's no like getting ready time because I like to sleep as much as possible. So then we have practice. I'm usually able to get a run in while our team is practicing because, I do coach running. So it's a little bit easier to run on the job when your job is coaching running, especially now training for the Olympic trials. And we're in kind of preseason for track. I can run a little bit more and, we don't have any crazy workouts going on. So typically from 7 to 9 is practice. And then the days, my teaching schedule, is different. So, I have most of my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays and an online class that I teach. So I can, so my Mondays and Wednesdays are usually a little bit lighter with workload. I can kind of just do stuff on the computer. So I typically I get to schedule my classes so I can load them out different ways. So it looks different depending on the day. And then, usually I'll get home. So like on Mondays and Wednesdays, I may have time for a nap. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I don't. But then, and then I'll run a second run and then just kind of help keep our toddler from destroying the house and keep him somewhat occupied until he goes to bed at around 8, and then just kind of get ready for the next day until bedtime, and kind of again try to pre-pack everything. That's kind of like a day. And then as meets start, Fridays and Saturdays, we typically may travel for a meet. Most of them are day trips, so either the meet's on Friday or the meet's on Saturday, and then we're there and back in one day. And then Sundays is, we usually always completely off for me, and that's when I can get a good long run in because I don't have any other responsibilities besides, keeping my kids alive.
So we've caught you between your 2 workouts today. Tell us what you did this morning. What are you going to do when you get off with us?
Yeah, I ran about 10 miles in the morning. I just got home from work, and so probably around like 3:30 or so, 3:45, I'll go for a second run. It'll probably be just an easy run. I'm most likely going to be doing a workout tomorrow, some intervals. But I got some new shoes, and I'll probably at least do some strides because I want to see how they feel.
So I'm going to ask you about that. Are you're gonna wear 3-week-old shoes in the trials, or do you have a bunch that you can possibly choose from?
I'll have a fresh pair. I have a bunch of right now the Hyperion Elite 4s. I have a handful of them. and just received the latest version of them. So I'll for sure have a fresh pair that I'll race. And usually I do one run in them, like Friday, or the trial is on Saturday. So I'll usually do my shakeout in them on Friday, do a couple strides, and then, so they have about 3 to 4 miles in.
And it's
what I'm comfortable
the
with.
marathon trials is the second time these shoes have been on your feet while running.
Well, I mean, those particular pair,
Right.
yeah. But like the model or the style, I've, gonna have run hundreds, maybe thousands of miles, lots of miles in. I pretty much do all of my training in the Hyperion Elite 4s now because they just feel good on every run. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to have put many, many miles in. So I know what the shoe feels like. It's just keeping that foam of that new shoe as fresh as possible. But they kind of come, like, you don't really have to break shoes in much anymore. I feel like when I was I don't know, when I first started running, I feel like it took like a week for shoes to feel good. But now, I don't know, they just feel good out of the box.
I guess you probably run your fingers pretty carefully all through the insides to make sure there's no funny stitch or anything of the race day shoes. Let me ask you about a taper. We're 3 weeks out now. Some people say you should be tapering for 3 weeks. Others have entirely different schedules. What does your taper look like, and how many more big workouts do you have?
Yeah, my training hasn't felt super good or as good as I would have liked to be feeling. So, in a sense, I feel like there's some more fitness thing. I don't know if fitness is the right word, but just more speed in general and things that I can still gain from now until the trial. So I'm definitely not going to be tapering. And I've never really done well with long tapers, or big tapers, even in high school and college. I don't think I ever ran well off of a taper. And I've typically performed really well in my highest training weeks. So I'm probably a combination of where I'm at in training and just my natural style. I'm going to be training pretty much full throttle, up until within 10 days. I try to be careful not to overdo it, but I'll keep training relatively normal, just with a little bit easier long run, and I won't go full blast and workouts within that 10 days, but keep mileage pretty much close to the same up until I travel. So I'll travel Wednesday and the race is on Saturday. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday will be pretty minimal. And, I feel like with those 3 days of easy, that's about all you need, as long as you haven't done something crazy and really fatigued yourself the days leading or, before that.
Something crazy. Some people say running 2 to 11 marathons 1 week apart is a bit crazy. Tell us about that. You did that just last month in California International and then Mexico.
Yeah, that wasn't. It wasn't particularly planned. I had planned to do CIM because it's a good race here in California, and with my contract and different things, I could win some decent money doing it. And it's close to my hometown. It's just fun, and I did want to have a race that was good, but that I could win if I ran well at the end, because it's especially with the trials, it's good to practice winning or placing really high, even if the race isn't as, it's not the same caliber. But so yeah, I had that race on the schedule. I did it. I won, and then I felt pretty good coming off of it. And I had looked at this race in Mexico briefly, maybe 3 weeks or a month before, and it just kind of popped into my head again. I found the course on Strava, saw it was super flat. I looked on my weather app, and it said the weather was going to be perfect, 45 degrees, no wind. So I was like, man, it's not really that far. I can hop a flight to San Diego, then drive 2 hours to the race. So it's only 3 hours total of travel time. So I was just like, what the heck? Let me try to do it. I feel good. It's a flat race, so it's not really going to hurt my legs too much. And if things aren't going well, I can just drop out and no one will even know, because, no one, like I don't even know I'm doing this race. So, I just kind of last minute decided to do it so I could get that 2:11:30 minimum standard times to be used as an Olympic, selection, like replacement. So I did that and it worked. I ran the time and I felt pretty good. I actually felt better in the Mexico race than I did at CIM. Legs wise, like I felt the second half felt way better than CIM, where I didn't particularly feel that good.
CJ, I'm not sure that George and I should admit this, but we've been going to marathon trials longer than you've been alive. Mostly watching, being part of the overall festivities. And they're always the most exciting race every 4 years, but this one is also the most confusing anybody has ever seen. Have you gotten all the information you need from the race organizers and USATF to make all of the key decisions? Do you know what the prize money is and how they're going to pick the team and all that stuff?
I don't know what the prize money is as of now.
How can that possibly be?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure they'll tell us before the race, but even last Olympic trials, they changed it. Probably within a week of the race. I don't remember exactly. I just know because what I thought I was going to win, I was different than what I actually did. And I don't remember when they changed it, but they changed it sometime. But anyways, I don't know the prize money yet. I mean, I'm not too concerned because I'm basically trying to be top 3 anyways. And then it's like whatever money you win after that is great. But I think they've announced the total prize purse or gave an estimate. It was like around, I don't know, 400,000 or 500,000, roughly around what it's been in the past couple times. But the actual breakdown, I don't believe has been sent out yet, or at least I haven't seen it yet. And the last time I looked, I couldn't find it. But as far as all the marathon qualifying, that has been recently updated. They sent us an email, and it's been published as of maybe 3 or 4 days ago. They basically clarified things. So they clarified that the third spot for the men, if the men earn a third spot to the Olympics after that secondary window for world rankings, they kind of clarified how that spot will be selected. And basically they're going to take the top 3 from the Olympic trials, assuming that the person that is either qualified or has run sub 2:11:30 or gets in after that secondary date is in the top 80 of the world rankings and qualifies. So they've kind of clarified everything. And I mean, for me, it's pretty simple. I just need to be top 3.
You said, CJ, you got a pretty decent payday when you won California International. Let us ask you, I think listeners would be really interested. Are you able to make a decent living? You've got a family, you've got a couple of kids. You're also, of course, coaching as well. Are you able to make a decent living as a professional marathon runner?
Yes. I mean, yes. The thing is it depends. So if you do well, then yeah. So, as far as my specific contract with Brooks, I can't share those details, but overall, when you take in salary, bonuses, appearance fees, prize money, everything that's specifically from running, but all those different things. Last year I made $119,000. So, which I felt like was pretty good. Now only I could have, before last year, it could have only been, it could have been less than half of that basically, but I ran well in races and did things that, upped my overall earnings. So I had a good year in terms of what I did based on how my contract is, based on appearance fees and prize money stuff. So it's very fluctuating because it could have been about 40% of that, or it was that, that 119 that I earned this year. So It's not necessarily a stable income. Some people have a very good base salary, and they know they're going to get certain appearance fees every year, so it can be a little bit more stable, and they kind of know what they're going to make each year. But yeah, you can. It just depends. I don't know, and what you determine as make a good living, but then you can do other things too, like being a professional runner allows you to. Like it gives me an opportunity to, I coach online, so I'll coach some athletes online, and I've been making around 25,000 or so a year from that, and I could probably make more. I just don't really have time to take on more athletes with my other job, teaching and coaching. So yeah, but if I wasn't teaching and coaching, I could probably coach more online athletes and make a little bit more through that. But then. Yeah, when I add all of my incomes together, I'm far above average, I would say.
Well, CJ, thank you for sharing that with us. A lot of people are reticent to do so. And of course, we understand contracts prohibit certain things, but you gave us a pretty good idea of what life is like. And it sounds like you got to perform to have an income, but there are some opportunities. I've been calling you, and I didn't ask you permission for this. Maybe you don't like it. I've been calling you sort of a working man's runner or working man's hero marathoner, by which I mean you don't have a 5K like Galen Rupp or Connor Mance or those guys. You're not a speed merchant. You're doing it the hard way, I would say. How do you think of yourself, and how do you get yourself ready for the starting line when Galen and Connor and guys like that are going to be on the starting line?
Yeah. I mean, as I reflect kind of on my running career and where I'm at now, it is interesting because my 5K PRs and what I did in college and things, like I appear to be on the slower side or not that fast, but then I look back and like when I was younger, like I was fast. Like I would say I had decent raw speed. It's just for whatever reason that in between isn't that good. Like when I was in, my sophomore year of high school, so whatever it was, 15, 16, I ran 4:12 in the 1600, 155 in the 800, and I ran like a 51 relay split in the 400. So, I mean, at that age, like 51 for a 400, it's not like slow. I mean, I couldn't even run that now. And then the next year I ran like a 50 in the 4x4, but yeah, so I wasn't slow and I could sprint decently well. But I don't really know what happened as I got into like 5,7 college. Yeah, I never ran particularly fast, but I think like my athleticism and my actual speed that I have isn't like, I'm not like your maybe typical marathoner that's like, man, like you watch him do strides and you're like, this guy's just not very fast, so he runs a marathon. But like, I view myself as I am fast, and like I was a miler, back in, I think everyone thought they were a miler in high school, but yeah, things just didn't quite work out. I never figured out the middle distances, but I think I did have all the tools. So like be fast, or like have the raw nature to be fast. And then obviously have the endurance or whatever, it takes to be a marathoner. Obviously, like I've done well in that. So yeah, I think, looking at like guys like Galen Rupp or those people that were like just national champions in college, like, yeah, I wasn't anywhere close to that level. And so sometimes looking at them as like, it's like, yeah, they're like the ones that are good. But then when I think back, it's like, well, when I really break it down to like how we were like just coming out of birth and just like our raw talent, like when I look at Galen Rupp, I'm like, man, if we just go back to like when we were 12, just like playing basketball or sprinting, like I don't see myself losing to him. Like I feel like I have more of that raw like athleticism. Maybe he has a different opinion, but that's how. So it's interesting because it's two totally different views, and like I view myself in both. Like, yeah, these guys are way faster than me, but then also, no, I'm more faster and athletic than them in different ways. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't even know how to view myself. I guess it's interesting, but I've been trying to trying to get back to more speed workout because I feel like I have this speed to tap into that hasn't quite been fulfilled or shown yet. So I don't know, maybe I'll figure it out.
We first I think a lot of people in running first got to know you on that the first Boston, when you just, flew out of Hopkinton and just took over and built up this lead. And I think an awful lot of people were just sitting around, elbowing each other saying, this guy's just, going to be on TV for a little while. And as the morning went on, there kept saying, gee, this is a real runner. And you were in the thick of this thing very late. What were you thinking? I mean, you were really flying out of there and took a big lead. And this is the Boston Marathon.
Yeah. I mean, I knew the first mile was a significant downhill. So I had practiced running downhill. I had specifically practiced for a fast first mile. And I had looked at the splits from Ryan Hall's year where they had that tailwind, and I think the course record was like 2:03:02. And so I knew it was like, okay, like on a faster year, you can go sub 4:30 that first mile because that's what they all ran. So I intentionally practiced that. I had no idea how the race was going to go out. And so I just went out the first mile kind of like I had practiced, not like pushing, but just letting myself just kind of just float down the hill, kind of lean into it and not run tentatively, basically just run it. And it's like over 100 feet downhill. So I think I ran 4:32, which converts to maybe mid 440s, maybe even 450. So it wasn't like I was pushing. I just was running. And some years that's what they run the first mile, but that particularly year they went out, I mean, extremely slow. The rest of the field was like 5 flat, which for that mile is, I mean, you think about a bunch of 202 guys, their average miles in the low 440s, and they go out 5 minutes down 110 feet. Like it's just insanely slow. So yeah, I just kind of ran what I had practiced to run, and then I had a lead, and then I had a bigger lead, and then I was like kind of confused. I was like, I don't even really know what's happening, but I'm just like, well, I'm just going to roll with it. And then once you're like 4 or 5 miles in the race, you're just running. And it's kind of settled in. And my first half wasn't particularly fast. I ran like around 64:20 or so. I mean, this previous Boston, I came through at 62:19, so over 2 minutes faster. But yeah, so I was at 64:19. I mean, it was quick, but again, it's like almost 300, 400 feet downhill that first half. So, yeah, I was surprised, I mean, to be honest, but I had a lot of fun, and I was just like trying to make the most of it because it was my first world marathon major, really besides the Olympic trials. It was my first big time marathon. So I was just like, I mean, I never expected this, but this is so fun. Like I'm leading the Boston Marathon, and now I'm 10 miles in, I'm 13 miles in, and I'm still like have a big lead. So after a while, I mean, you just have fun with it. And I did. And then when they caught me, I was able to like regroup and get back in the mix. And I mean, it was just a fun day.
You held up well. You held up well. You had, in fact, all your Bostons.
Yeah, you've backed it up 2 more times with faster performances. I'm going to move us back up to the trials because that's on everybody's screen very, very shortly. You've recently become famous or infamous, perhaps, for some treadmill workouts where, I don't know if this is in your basement, but you've got a fairly small room with a whole bunch of infrared red lamps trained on you for heat, I guess. Can you explain to us what you're doing and what the philosophy is?
Yeah, so I have basically like 11 heat lamps, the infrared heat lamps, and basically they're just hooked around my treadmill to increase the heat pretty much. There's a little bit with the infrared, it penetrates and makes your actual core body temperature a little bit hotter, but and then I have a humidifier to make it humid, but basically to get heat adapted. Because Orlando, I mean, it may be nice weather. It'll definitely be nice spectating weather, but it could be a little bit warm/humid for an ideal marathon. So I'm basically just training for that. And doing, obviously it's in my treadmill setups in more extreme conditions, but I'm not doing all of my runs on that because I'm not going to do all my marathon training on the treadmill, but just, getting in, 3 to 5 sessions a week at a much hotter, more humid environment than what Orlando would be should be sufficient to make the adaptations to where if it is warm, hopefully I should be at least somewhat prepared for it.
Is this something relatively new for you, or have you been doing it for a few years?
No, I've had these for a few years. I don't consistently use it with training, but a lot of times if I'm not in great shape, as I'm getting back into shape and maybe not running tons of miles or something, it's a good way to supplement aerobic fitness. So I've used it kind of off and on the past couple of years.
So you do fast, long runs, I understand. And how hard do you push yourself? And we know there are runners, including Eliud Kipchoge, who say they never run more than kind of 80% in training. And what's your philosophy about all that?
Yeah, I think when people say that, 80% doesn't mean 80% of speed. I think 80% effort is probably close to 97% of what they would consider their max. So you can feel, especially in marathon training, you can feel super, super comfortable in a range. Yeah, 80%. And then you run 5-10 seconds per mile faster. And now you're I'm pretty close to 100%. So the difference between 80 and 100 is a pretty small window, but, which is hard for people, I think, to kind of realize, because they think they may think 80% is running 6 minute per mile pace for a 25-mile run. Whereas no, it's if my race pace is 4:55 to 5 flat pace for a marathon, my 80% where I'm just really just feeling good in the groove, not really putting in any mental effort, maybe 5:15, 5:20 pace. So, and people are this just doesn't make sense, but that's just what it is. After you've been training lots and lots of time and you've done that work. So when Kipchoge says that, it's I don't disbelieve him. I believe him, but I also know what he means by that. So my runs, they're probably a lot of workouts are more 80% in that effort range. Again, what 80% means to us. And then I may push it towards the end at around 90, 95%. You almost never go 100% in practice because you probably run slower when you run 100%. Typically, when you think you're running at 95% effort, you're actually running as fast as possible. Once you get to 100% effort, you're probably running slower because you're tense. You're just straining too much, especially for a longer workout. So that's kind of what I do. I feel I never really push it super, super hard. But every once in a while I'll push it into that 90 or higher percent. Also, I'm training by myself. So the mental effort is a little bit more. So if you're just sitting on people, it's easier. But when I'm doing it by myself, it's the mental effort is a little bit harder than what it would be if I had a group.
CJ, if you would, take us to the starting line of the marathon trials on the 3rd. The gun goes off, and there are a lot of things that could happen, but a few scenarios you're playing through in your head. What are some of the scenarios you see, and what is CJ Albertson going to do in this race?
Yeah, a lot is probably going to depend on the weather. So if it is on the warmer side, if it's 70 degrees or warmer with some decent humidity, it's probably going to go out on the slower end. So it's going to be a big group. I would imagine, there may be, but then, maybe it could be the opposite. It could be because it's hot. Some people that have really put a lot of effort into heat adaptation are I can roll 209 with it being hot. So I'm just going to go out and do that. And it'll break the field up early because people will be that's too fast for these conditions. I don't know. So but then if it's, if it's good temperatures, you never know either. It could just go out around 5-minute pace, because that's, for a lot of people, that's kind of a sweet, easy spot where you're just kind of jogging around at 2:11 pace. It could go out, at 2:08 flat pace, or even a little faster. I don't really know. So I'm probably just going to kind of go with the group and be like towards the front. I don't really like plan on leading or doing anything. If we're on some tailwind sections, I'll probably just run whatever feels comfortable. And if that puts me into the lead, then, it is what it is. And I'm fine just running my own comfortable pace. But if there's any sort of like significant wind, I don't really want to be in the front. So, yeah, I mean, the first 10 or so miles, you kind of just see what happens. And I feel like if you have a set plan, it's probably not going to go like that anyway. So you kind of just, you just go out there and work on the fly a little bit.
Are you running to win? Are you happy with third place in 2:12?
I mean, yeah, I would, well, both. I would be happy with third place regardless of the time. And then I think when you're competing to win, it gives you, for the most part, gives you the best shot for third. Now, if there's a situation where there's like 4 or 5 of us left and someone makes a hard move, yeah, then maybe I let them go and I run to win the group that I'm in. But overall, I think, you try to run to win, and then you kind of gauge how you're feeling. Like if you're like, well, if there's ever the chance of I could go for the win or have better odds at being top 3, then I'm going to go with the better odds at being the top 3. Like I'm not going to sacrifice anything for the win.
So, CJ, if we had a statistician talking to us like Jared Ward, and we asked him what his chances were, he'd say, 18% or something very finite like that. How do you look at your chances, and where do you see yourself at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm not a favorite, so I would say I'm less than 50% chance to make it. But then in between 0 and 50, I don't know. Like I think I have decent odds. Like they're it's not like a long shot. Like I'm better than 5%, maybe even better than 10%. But I don't know. There's just so many guys that are so close of a range that it's hard to give a percentage. But I have a good enough shot for it to be realistic. But again, it's not over 50%.
CJ, you're our guest today, so of course we're rooting for you. But who knows what will happen in Orlando or Paris. But looking forward, I think there are a lot of people who want you to tackle the ultra world. Is that on your list?
Selectively, yeah. Eventually I think I would like to do the 50-mile, 100K, maybe 100-mile. But mostly all road / flat-ish running. Like the trails like UMTB or things like that, like probably not. Except for wow. Why am I Badwater? That's not really a trail. Most of it's road. So like Badwater, like that's an ultra event, but it's in Death Valley. It's hot. Like that sounds fun. I want to do the hot ones. But yeah, for the most part, things where you can run relatively fast, like 50 mile, 100K, even up to 100 mile, like those seem fun to me, but the mountain climbing, I'm not.
It only just occurred to me, but George and I have both been to Comrades, and I'm sure you know that there's a downhill run as well as the uphill. So you definitely got to go run downhill at Comrades.
I had planned, I think in one of the COVID years, I had planned to do it, and it obviously didn't end up happening. I had looked into doing it. I never fully started training for it, but yeah, that race definitely excites me. We'll see how the dates work, but I would like to run it on a downhill year.
It would be great. I think you do well out there. It's an incredible race, and we all remember the year Alberto won the race, mostly training on a treadmill, which was pretty Spectacular. So, CJ, coming up to the trials before we wrap, we're going to get your, who do you see as not yourself, but who do you see as, let's say, the 5 main players in the men's race that you're looking at?
I mean, I think like if I have to like list 5, you kind of have to go with just this kind of a clear break off, like based on recent events. Connor Mance, Clayton Young, Galen Rupp, Sam Chalenga, and Scott Fauble have all run under 209 recently. And I think they're the only 5 that have, so it's hard to not, and they historically are pretty decent racers, so it's hard not to list them. But then you just have so many guys that are also in the mix, like Leonard Careers run 207, Simbasa, like anything under a marathon, he seems to win everything. McCohen, Zach Panning ran well in the heat at Worlds. He has also run 209. So there's just Footsum is coming up. So there's just so many guys that, I mean, I've always said there's like 15 to 20 guys that I think have a somewhat realistic shot to make it and that can run in that 208 range, on their day. So
I guess that's why they hold the race, and that's why we're all looking forward to it so very, very much. We've come down to the last 2 questions of this podcast. CJ, the first of them is the state of the sport of running question. What do you think is going really well in this sport on the whole? What's okay and what's not so okay, if you have thoughts like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would preface it with I'm not like super deep into all of the happenings of the sport or, any of the political things or things like that. I'm kind of just an average person in that sense. I think going well. I mean, obviously I'm biased here, but I have to say marathons are going pretty well. I mean, every time I'm at like a relatively big marathon, I mean, the energy is just great. Like it's just so much. I mean, that's why I like racing. Like marathons are just so fun to be at the whole weekend. There's just so many people just running and they're super fun. I feel like, good. I mean, they all seem, pretty much all the big ones are all sold out. Like people want to get in. And so like anytime people are like, desperately trying to get in, like Boston or, signing up for lotteries just to get into so they can pay $500 to run a race. Like, I feel like that's pretty good, So marathons and, people sometimes complain about the coverage, but I feel like, it's the pros and cons with it. I don't feel like it's necessarily bad. Could maybe be better, but yeah, I mean, I think marathons are good and fun. And yeah, I don't know. Like I feel like for road running, it's good. Track is more confusing, I think. I mean, the Europe meets seem to go really well. I don't know. Like America has a couple, decent track meets, but not quite like how some of the European Diamond Leagues and their smaller circuits. So that could probably be improved. I know they talk about it a lot, but I'm not really in that world because I just don't run any track races. So I don't have much to say because I just don't really know.
Well, here's our final question for you, CJ. We're going to give you 3 fairy godmother wishes for 2024. And they're whatever 3 wishes you want other than you can't wish for more wishes. But you name them and they can be just whatever you choose.
Yeah, I was thinking about this and then I forgot about it. I'm not going to have good answers. One I know would be to just have energy. Basically, like things in training and things I like to do, like I like to enjoy them, but you have to have a fairly substantial amount of energy to do them. So if I just had like a lot of energy, I feel like I could do a lot of maybe cool things or things that I've been wanting to get done, like both in work, personal life, and running. Yeah, just energy. I mean, I feel like when I was thinking about a lot of the things that like you wish for, like maybe someone would say, oh, like you wish you make the Olympic team, but it's like I have control over that. So like it doesn't seem like I can wish for something that I have control over, or at least part control over. And it wouldn't be fun. Like if a fairy godmother granted me like, oh, I got to go to Paris, or I got to like win this race or win Boston or qualify for the Olympics. It's like, well, then the whole point of it being fun, of me trying to accomplish this great feat, would then be taken away because I got it in a wish. So I was trying to think of like, what can I wish for that is outside my control? And it's like, all I could think of was like, kind of big things like wars ending and stuff. I don't know. Maybe like if our track, we are at our community college, our track is they're supposed to start breaking ground in October, which is later than this to be. So ideally we'd have like some big donor come in and they just start construction right now. We'd have better stuff than we're planning on having, and like a full stadium, and we'd have a really nice scoreboard, like video scoreboard, because we're not going to have that, but I want one.
CJ, I want to say you can absolutely ask our fairy godmother for a win in the marathon trials, because we know it's not happening without all of your effort. You can ask for a rich donor for that track that you want to have built, because there aren't enough of those in track and field. We'd all like to see more. But really, your answers showed us the work ethic again, that you don't want anything that you haven't achieved with your work ethic. And I think that says a lot. And George and I just want to thank you for joining us on this podcast. You've given us a lot of time. You've been very forthright, and it's been really fun talking with you as well. So thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you both. It was fun.
George, that was a great conversation with CJ Albertson. He gave us really a lot of specific information on a range of topics that I found very interesting. A couple of things that really stuck out for me were, I love the fact that on race day at the trials, he will be running in a pair of Brooks Hyperion Elite 4 that he has run in previously just 3 miles. He's going to wear them the day before the race and then in the marathon trials itself. And the reason he's only wearing them for 3 miles is he wants the freshest foam, the freshest super foam underfoot that he can possibly get. So he's got some new shoes in that race. And also, of course, you kind of got to love the fact that he's training on a treadmill in his basement with 11, no fewer than 11 infrared heat lamps trained in his direction, and also a humidifier to make the conditions even worse and more arduous as he prepares for this, perhaps the most important race of his life.
So, Amby, let me ask you something. Humidifier and infrared lamps and training on a treadmill with that. How much of this do you think is psychological, and how much do you think has really physiological benefits?
I think it's about 50% physiological and 150% psychological, because, if you convince yourself that you've trained in extraordinarily difficult conditions, way more difficult than Orlando will be, no matter what the weather is. It's not going to be as bad as his basement. Of course, that's going to make you feel a little bit better in the race. So, yeah, the psychology of training is always at least as important as the physiological, I guess. So what did you think, George, of CJ's comments?
Yeah, I like our fairy godmother questions. I think when we ask them, we get some insight into the people. And we know that CJ is a guy who, he hasn't, won super big races. He has won California International, of course, and so on. And he's doing well. But we also know he's really become popular out there in the running community. And I think his answers to our questions, I think it's indicative of who he was. I mean, 3 fairy godmother wishes, and none of them were making the team and getting to the Paris Olympics a few weeks before the Olympic trials. He said he really wanted to have a lot of energy this year so he could go out and do a lot of cool things. I mean, that just struck me as very insightful. And the other wish that he called out was he coaches, of course, at the Clovis Community College out there in California, and he said he was hoping that a big donor would, they were going to break ground on a track, and that he was hoping a big donor would come along and put in a really nice scoreboard for the kids that were running out there. And that's a real sense of community when that's one of your top wishes. I like that.
Well, it would certainly make you want to be a runner on his team or in that community because he's so focused on them. And I particularly liked with you the fact that he in effect said it would be unfair to have a fairy godmother give him a wish like making the Olympic team. If he wants to make the Olympic team, he doesn't want it to be with a fairy godmother. He wants it to be because he's talented and training hard and has 11 heat lamps on him in the basement. And it's all work, work, work and reward, not some fanciful way of getting to the Olympics. So that's it for this week's episode of Running State of the Sport. We hope you enjoyed joining us as much as we enjoyed sharing the time with you. We'll be back again soon with our last pre-marathon trials podcast, where we plan to talk to Joan Benoit Samuelson and Frank Shorter, both of whom know a thing or two about running in the marathon trials. Until then, please tell your friends about Running State of the Sport. We'd also appreciate a review at your favorite podcast host, like Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts. And in signing off, here's our hope for the state of your own personal running. Chin up, clear eyes, full heart, keep moving, onward.